Hello students, this is your Professor Harold Crook. This is the recap for the lecture on Monday, January 27th. The assignments are make sure and do your reading quiz on Blackboard in the content folder 1. Read Eugene Hunn's chapter 2 about history of the plateau. Be sure and read the following stories from Phinney, which are all located on Blackboard: The Boy and the Wolves, Joseph's Speech, and Blue Jay and the Well-Behaved Maiden. And be ready to do a small written quiz in class on Wednesday that will recap the readings. That's including the history chapter from Hunn. Today we talked about what is the Columbia Plateau. It's a shared area of geology, particularly the Badlands and rivers, streams, and mountain areas that all the Indian people of the plateau are able to use. There's a shared ecology of salmon and different roots and berries that people are able to use. And then human societies, so the people groups, the Sahaptins and Nez Perces, the Salishes, and others who live in the plateau region and are able to use all these different resources. This is a map that shows the plateau region there in the center, outlined in red. Most of the groups in the north are Salish groups, as you can see by the key. We have some Sahaptin groups down south, and the Nez Perce is included in the Sahaptian group. And Kootenai, which has a dotted underline in southeastern British Columbia, is a language isolate. Here's another map showing the plateau groups. Notice that people which are called Plateauan don't only live in the Columbia Plateau. The Klamaths and Modocs have a plateau culture, but they live in southwestern Oregon. Also, Indians who live in the Willamette Valley have a plateau kind of a culture, as opposed to, say, the Great Basin culture in southeast of the plateau, the Plains culture, which is across the Rocky Mountains, and then the coastal culture, which would be, of course, along the coast. We talked about the land. The Nez Perce word for land is watis. The land is a stage where the events happen, but it's also a protagonist. The land plays an important role, and culture is the script. Now, these are all described by Hunn in the first page of his chapter on the introduction to Nch'i. There's the ecology. So our anthropologist training is in ethnobotany. He worked with Yucatan Mayan people. He got involved in the plateau studies. And then he worked with the Sahaptin peoples that we can see in the central area of this map here. He worked especially with Yakimas and has continued to working with them until this day. As far as society is concerned, the Sahaptin people have headmen, or the word sometimes is translated as chief, but it is not a paramount chief, a chief over the whole group. Headmen were the heads of bands. They were leaders as much as they were needed to be leaders, and they could be leaders of different things. A person might be a combat leader, and a person might be a leader of the village and organization. And then there's a salmon chief, and other kinds of chiefs or headmen for different things. 10,000 years of occupation in the plateau at least, if not much more. All the peoples in this area had important knowledge that helped them to live here. So they gathered and hunted throughout the seasonal round, which we will get into more when we look at the ecology and the resources in later chapters in Hunn. Fishing through many different opportunities. Adaptation to climate change. So climate change has gone through the plateau thousands of years ago, and people adapted to that. And then myths distill and keep the knowledge of the culture, knowledge of the land, of the animals, and things like this. And that is the script. We can't, of course, we don't have the script of culture internalized as someone who grew up here would, who is a Plateau Indian, but we can, in some ways, read the script through the stories that we read. One of my favorite cartoons, the anthropologists, and Hunn talks a lot about the relationship of anthropologists to Indians. This is one of his main teachers, Mr. James Silam. And this comes out of the tradition started by Franz Boas. This man came from Europe. He was a European Jew and founded American ethnography. He sent out many ethnographers, training Edward Sapir, Melville Jacobs, and Archie Phinney. Edward and all these people trained further people to examine languages, to study them, and to document them. This is Archie Phinney as a young man, and his mother on the right-hand side. She very much strongly believed in him getting a good education. He grew up in cul-de-sac. He won the Idaho Spelling Bee. He went to University of Kansas, then got his Bachelor of Arts there. He then went to Washington, D.C. and worked. Once there, he began writing letters to Boas and told Boas that he wanted to get his Ph.D. and work on the Nez Perce language. And you can read a short biography of him on the Blackboard website. It's there as a PDF. This is him in later years. Mr. Phinney went to Russia. He got his PhD there. He studied how the Soviet Union was working with native people there. He wrote down all his mother's stories and translated them. And then he came home, and he eventually became the Bureau of Indian Affairs agent in Lapwai. Hunn has these two statements about ethics in anthropology, promoting an empathetic appreciation of all humanity, an appreciation that should bring people closer together in closer understanding, and the AAA statement of ethics. These two important tensions exist. Knowledge is power, so the many Native people feel that it's important to keep Native knowledge to them and not let it go out because they lose their power, their command over the resources, traditional hunting grounds and gathering areas. On the other hand, Eugene Hunn argues that the truth will set you free is even more important because by learning about these cultures, people will appreciate them more and respect them more. We talked about the glutton, how the land is the stage and a protagonist in this story. So you should be sure you've read it well and understand it. And that's as far as we got in today's class.